Have you ever laid awake in the middle of the night, just looping over the same thought again and again? A careless comment you made, an embarrassing moment you wish you could erase, a worry about something that hasn't even happened yet, but still, it traps you in your own mind. You know it's not helping, but you don't know how to stop. What most people never tell you is this: you don't have to force yourself to stop thinking. You don't have to meditate for 3 hours a day. You don't need to withdraw from life. All you really need is to understand 11 simple practices rooted in the 2500-year-old wisdom of the Buddha that can help you meet and transform those negative thoughts the very moment they arise. I used to overthink everything, replaying conversations, blaming myself for things that didn't matter, worrying about all the what-ifs that hadn't happened. But ever since I started practicing these simple teachings, I've learned how to stop being a victim of my thoughts and instead become someone who can sit still in the middle of a stormy sea. This isn't abstract philosophy. These are real-life skills. Practical, grounded, and available right now, whether you're working, parenting, or just trying to get through a tough day. And the most important thing, you don't have to be perfect to find peace. You just need to come back. And every time you come back, you take one solid step toward inner freedom. So, how do you step out of the spiral of negative thinking? Let's begin with the first and most powerful shift: realizing that you are not the thoughts in your head. Some days, the mind feels like a cramped little room, filled with thoughts that barge in uninvited, bouncing off the walls, echoing in the background. Not loud, not dramatic, but heavy. Unanswered questions, old memories, regrets that start with "I should've." It's like your mind isn't a place of rest anymore, but a space hijacked by the past and blurry worries about the future. And then something natural happens. You start believing you are those thoughts. You think, "I'm a failure because I messed up. I'm weak because I worry too much. I'm not worthy because I can't quiet my mind." But the Buddha taught a profound truth over 2,500 years ago. You are not your thoughts. Imagine your mind as a vast ocean. Thoughts, whether joyful or anxious, inspiring or painful, are just little waves rising and falling on the surface. Some days the waters are calm, other days stormy, but every wave eventually fades. What's always there underneath is the ocean itself. Still, deep, whole, and that ocean is your true mind, unstained by any single thought, never truly lost, no matter how big the storm above. Ancient teachers called it original mind, the awareness untouched by external events or passing mental chatter. That's why, when you sit next to someone who's deeply at peace, you feel it. They don't need to say much, but their presence brings a quiet stillness like a breeze across a calm lake. Not dramatic, just peaceful, just steady. In an old Buddhist teaching, the untrained mind is compared to a wild monkey leaping from branch to branch, never stopping. And really, that's such a perfect image of modern life. Without mindfulness, the mind jumps from money to work to illness to that one regret from 10 years ago. And that's not wrong. The mind was built to think. The problem is, we start identifying with every thought. We start living as if those waves are the whole truth of who we are. I once met a middle-aged woman during a retreat in New Jersey. She told me that every time she thought about her past marriage, she was flooded with regret and self-blame. "I ruined it," she said. "I should have done more to save it." But after a few sessions of mindfulness practice, her first insight wasn't about forgiving her ex. It was about forgiving herself. Not because she didn't make mistakes, But because she realized, that thought isn't me, it's just a wave from memory. I don't have to live inside it forever. You don't have to force your thoughts away. You don't need to control every stream of your mind. You just need to remember, you are not those thoughts. And in the moment you remember that something shifts, there's a pause, a stillness, a homecoming. Someone once asked me, how do I know if I'm no longer controlled by my thoughts? The answer doesn't lie in whether your mind is quiet or busy. The answer is, do you still believe every thought is absolute truth? Because when you stop getting pulled into every story your mind spins, you've already taken a step toward freedom. When you can say to yourself, oh, that's just a thought. Nothing more, nothing less. You return to the calm motion inside. And the beauty is, that return doesn't have to be dramatic. It can begin right now, in the middle of a chaotic day, while doing the dishes, while riding the bus, or right after you said something you wish you hadn't. All it takes is a single pause, and the gentle reminder, you are not the noise inside your head. You are the one who hears it. 2. Every return to the present moment is a small victory. In everyday life, there are moments when it feels like we're living, but in truth, we're just drifting carried along by a stream of nameless thoughts. A woman sits in front of the stove, stirring dinner, but in her mind, she's reliving an argument from last year. A man is driving to work, but his heart has been somewhere else ever since reading that critical email from his boss. A young mother rocks her baby to sleep, yet her chest is full of unspoken fears about how her child will grow up in this uncertain world. The mind slips away from the present so easily. It wanders back into the past where regret lives, or it races toward the future where nothing is certain. Rarely are we truly here for what's happening right now. And when we do realize we've drifted, our first reaction is often self-criticism. Why do I keep overthinking? I need to focus more. Here I go again, worrying for no reason. But according to the Buddha, mindfulness isn't some fixed state you're supposed to hold on to with willpower. Mindfulness is the act of returning. It's the moment you realize you've wandered off and gently come back. Getting lost isn't wrong. What matters is that you return. That's already a win. There's a story in the Dhammapada about a man who had done many terrible things in the past. When he met the Buddha, he was ashamed, convinced that he was unworthy of spiritual practice. But the Buddha simply smiled and said, just like a cart that's veered off the road, the one who turns it back is already on the right path. It's not only those who stay perfectly straight who are walking a good path. It's those who notice they've strayed and adjust who are truly practicing. We don't need to be enlightened every moment of the day. We just need to be awake enough to notice, oh, I've left the present, but now I'm coming back. A deep breath, a touch on your palm, a glance out the window at the sky, even the soft awareness of your heartbeat in your chest. Any of these can be a small doorway home. I once heard a middle-aged man share this during a Dharma talk. I used to think practice meant being calm all the time, getting angry, never being sad. But now I understand. Sometimes practice is just realizing I'm losing my temper, and instead of yelling, I stop, breathe, and speak more gently. That is practice. Every return is a victory, not over others, not over the world, but over the old patterns of your own mind, the habit of chasing thoughts and drowning in emotions. It's like learning to walk a tightrope. No one expects you to never lean off balance. The key is knowing when you're tilting and finding your center again. That's mindfulness. Not rigid, not forced, not perfect. Just returning and returning and returning again. And here's the beautiful part. Every time you come back, you're not starting from scratch. Each return makes the mind a little steadier. Your awareness becomes more refined. The gap between I notice and I react automatically becomes shorter, and that built up over momentous, the foundation of a mindful life. Many people believe peace only comes after years of deep retreat. But the truth is, every time you come back to the present, you're planting a seed of peace for your future. You don't have to be a monk. You don't have to quit your job and live in the mountains. You just have to be alive and choose to return. 3. The 3 mental habits that quietly create suffering. One afternoon after a meditation session, a man in his 50s came up to me and said quietly, "I don't get it. I have a good life, family, work, health. Nothing's missing. But there's always this quiet voice in my head whispering, it's not enough." And honestly, that's not rare. So many people live with material comfort but still feel emotionally empty. If you listen closely to the voice in your mind, you'll notice there are 3 particular patterns that often show up, 3 mental habits that create a surprising amount of suffering. Not because of the outside world, but because of how we interpret it from the inside. In the Buddha's teachings, these are seen as 3 inner tendencies, not enemies but habits, that, if we don't recognize them, quietly guide our lives on autopilot. And we start believing everything they say is truth. The first one is the comparing mind. It whispers, "They're better than me." You're fine one moment, then you scroll past a photo of an old friend vacationing in Europe or celebrating some achievement, and suddenly there it is, a flicker of envy, a touch of self-doubt, a tiny question about your own worth. Comparison is a natural instinct, but it becomes suffering when we use it to measure our value. Compared to whom? And based on what? Who really sets the standard for what's enough? There's a line in the Satipatthana Sutta that says, "One observes the body as body, feelings as feelings, and mind as mind." When we see things simply as they are without labeling them better or worse, the chains of comparison start to loosen. The second is the storytelling mind. One small thought arises, and suddenly, the mind spins it into a whole movie. Someone doesn't reply to your text, you assume they're mad. A vague comment, you turn it into an insult. One minor failure, you rewrite it as, "I'm just not meant to succeed." The mind loves stories. But here's the thing, they're often not true. Many of these stories don't come from reality, but from fear, old wounds, or memories we haven't healed. A Buddhist practitioner once told me, "I live 10 minutes in the present and 10 hours in imaginary drama." The pain isn't usually in what happened, it's in the story we tell about what happened. In one old teaching, the Buddha said, "An unmindful person is like someone shot with 2 arrows. The first arrow is the actual event. The second is our reaction." Yes, the first pain might be real, but it's the story we add afterward that keeps that pain alive. And the third is the controlling mind. When we feel insecure, the first instinct is to fix it, plan more, prepare more, overthink everything. The mind says, "If I just analyze this enough, I'll avoid risk. I'll stay safe." But life never fits into that tidy little box we want. The more we try to control, the more anxious we become. The more we fear loss, the more trapped we feel by the uncertainty of life. The Buddha taught, impermanence is the nature of all things. Nothing stays fixed. There's no perfect plan, no total control. And freedom, it's not about how much we hold on to, it's about how much we can let go. A retired doctor in Boston once told me, "I used to think that if I thought long enough, I could control everything. But after practicing meditation, I learned something strange. The more I let go, the clearer I became. The more I accepted what I didn't know, the more peace I felt." These three minds: comparison, storytelling, control, they're not bad. They're just doing their job, trying to protect us from pain, from feeling like we're not enough. But the moment we start to live with awareness, we no longer have to believe everything they whisper. We can listen without becoming them, understand without being swept away. And the very first step toward freedom is recognition. Oh, this is comparison talking. I'm making up an old story again. Yep, here I go, trying to control everything, and it's exhausting me. When we name the mind correctly, something amazing happens. It stops running the show, and we become the observer. And from that place, freedom begins. 4. Peace doesn't come from controlling the mind. It comes from acceptance. There's something kind of strange about the journey to find inner peace. The more you try to force your mind to be quiet, the louder it gets. The harder you push away negative thoughts, the more they cling to you like a shadow that won't leave you alone at the end of the day. Sometimes, the mind feels like a restless child. The more you scold it, the louder it cries. And without realizing it, we start fighting with our own mind. Stop thinking already. Why is my head always like this? Maybe I'll never be able to control it. But in the Buddha's teachings, there's a gentle yet profound truth. The mind doesn't need to be controlled. It just wants to be accepted. Not indulged, but understood. Not silenced, but seen. I remember one meditation session where a man in his late 50s opened his eyes and shared, "My mind was all over the place today. I thought about my son, his job, my illness, all the worries piling up. I was so angry that my mind wouldn't just calm down." There was a long pause after he spoke. Then a young woman sitting nearby softly said, "I used to feel that way too, but over time, I learned to just sit with my mind, like sitting next to a panicked friend. I didn't have to fix anything. I just had to not abandon it." And that right there is a turning point. Because most of our suffering doesn't actually come from the thoughts themselves. It comes from how we treat those thoughts. When the mind starts to race, instead of fighting it, we can pause, breathe, and gently say, "Hello, I see you're here." That's it. No judgment. No fixing. No deep analysis. Just presence. Like when a strong wind stirs the surface of a lakif, you don't throw stones or try to fight the waves. The water will eventually settle on its own. That's the natural state of the mind. Peace isn't some rare, mystical state reserved for advanced meditators. Peace is simply what happens when we stop fighting our own mind. It's knowing how to sit still even when the wind is blowing. It's breathing steadily even when noise fills the room inside us. There's a story from the Nikaya scriptures about a young monk struggling during meditation. He came to the Buddha and said, "Lord, my mind is like a wild horse. I can't control it." The Buddha smiled and replied, "You don't tame a horse with force. You calm it with steady presence." The mind is the same. When it's met with compassion and unconditional presence, it begins to settle not because we forced it to, but because it finally feels safe enough to stop thrashing around. There's a saying in Vipassana meditation, "You don't need to chase out the darkness, just light the lamp." Negative thoughts don't need to be pushed away. They just need your presence, your stillness, your honesty. One woman who had endured deep childhood trauma told me she spent 20 years fighting her mind. Every time a memory came up, she tensed. Every time emotions rose, she saw them as an attack. But through mindfulness practice, she came to this realization. Each memory wasn't her enemy. It was a part of her past that just wanted to be seen, and then gently laid to rest. She no longer tried to make her mind quiet. She just stayed present with what was happening and stopped getting dragged by it. And when she learned how to stay with herself like that, peace came. Not as something to chase, not as something to win, but simply as a return to this very moment, where the mind can be whatever it is right now and still be held with kindness. 5. Mindfulness doesn't happen only in the meditation room. It happens in the middle of a busy life. When people hear the word mindfulness, a certain image often comes to mind. Someone sitting silently on a cushion, in a quiet room lit by candlelight, the scent of incense gently filling the air. No traffic sounds, no looming deadlines, no unread emails, just stillness. And naturally, many people think, I don't have time for mindfulness. My life's too busy. I've got kids, a job, bills, responsibilities. I can't sit still for hours like that. But what's beautiful about the Buddha's teachings is this. Mindfulness isn't limited to a certain space or condition. It doesn't depend on candles, incense, or a perfect bell sound. Mindfulness simply means returning to yourself right here, right now, no matter where you are, what you're doing, or how chaotic life feels. In the Satipatthana Sutta, Buddha's teachings on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, he didn't say, when you're meditating, focus on your breath. He said, when walking, know you're walking. When standing, know you're standing. When eating, know you're eating. When a feeling arises, know what that feeling is. In other words, life itself is the meditation. A morning cup of coffee, turning on the faucet, waiting for the elevator. These are all chances to practice mindfulness. There's a woman in California, about 60 years old, who once shared this at a retreat. I used to think meditation wasn't for me. I'm an anxious person and my mind's always racing. But one morning, while making coffee, I just paused. Watched the water pour into the cup. Listened to the quiet clicks of the machine. And for the first time that day, I felt present. She added, it wasn't anything big, but it felt like I had come home. And that's the truth. We don't need to go far to return to ourselves. We don't need to put our lives on hold to live mindfully. We just need to show up with our breath, our body, and our awareness for the moment we're already in. When you walk, feel your feet touching the ground. You don't have to walk in slow motion like in a monastery. Just know, I'm walking. Not the body walking, while the mind is somewhere else. But all of you, fully here, for each step. There's a doctor in New York who said he doesn't meditate every day, but he does take one mindful breath every time he opens his clinic door. Each time my hand touches the doorknob, he told me, I pause for 1 second and breathe. That breath helps me enter the room fully present for my patient. Even in moments of worry, you can still practice. You don't need to push the anxiety away. Just pause and ask, is this thought actually happening right now? Often, we're worrying about something that hasn't even happened. And with that one question, the mind slows down. You don't erase the fear, but you see it. And once it's seen, it starts to lose its power. Practicing mindfulness isn't about adding another task to an already full to-do list. It's about stepping out of autopilot and starting to live as if each moment matters. Imagine you're washing the dishes. Warm water runs over your hands. You smell the soft scent of soap. You hear the gentle clink of glasses. You're there not in the past, not in the future, just you and the moment meeting one another. You don't need to do something profound to live deeply. You just have to choose to come back once, then again. And that is the very heart of Buddhist meditation. Not escaping life, but fully living it. 6. Negative thoughts aren't the enemy. They're an invitation to practice. In today's world, we're often told that to find peace, we need to eliminate negative thoughts. So many books talk about banishing anxiety, getting rid of negativity, or removing toxic thoughts from your mind. But here's the truth. The more you try to push negative thoughts out of your head, the more they cling to you. The harder you try to silence them, the louder they get. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It doesn't disappear. It just builds pressure, waiting to pop up even stronger. And in the Buddhist teachings, there's a gentle but revolutionary truth. Negative thoughts are not the enemy. They're a natural part of the mind. And more than that, they're an opportunity to practice. I once witnessed a young woman at a retreat in Northern California, eyes red, clearly holding back tears. She said, "Every time I meditate, my mind keeps repeating awful things about myself, how I'm not good enough, how I ruin everything. I hate these thoughts so much I just want to scream at them to go away." The teacher that day simply smiled and said, "Then don't scream. Try smiling back instead. Say to those thoughts, like you would to an old friend, 'Ah, there you are. It's been a while.' Because it's not the thoughts themselves that cause suffering, it's how we relate to them. When we change the way we meet our negative thoughts, something truly powerful happens. They stop controlling us. They stop sweeping us away like a flood. They become like a stream that we can simply sit beside and observe calm and steady. Imagine a negative thought as an old friend stopping by. Maybe not the easiest guest, but they're not here to harm you. They're here to remind you of something inside that hasn't been heard. An unspoken fear, an unhealed wound, a memory that still needs peace. So the next time a negative thought shows up, instead of thinking, not again, or what's wrong with me, you can pause and gently say, "Hello, I see you." That's it, no resistance, no agreement, no chasing it away. Just presence, just awareness, just softness. One longtime meditator once said that in 40 years of practice, he's never reached a state of no more negative thoughts. But what changed is they stopped hurting him. He stopped reacting. He stopped fighting. He simply watched, like an old man watching clouds drift over mountains, knowing none of them stay forever. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha taught, if an unwholesome thought arises, the wise one should not fear it. Simply see that it's there, and when it's not fed, it will pass on its own. One of the deepest truths in the Dharma is this: it's not the negative thought that creates suffering. It's how we cling to it, feed it, or push it away that drains our energy. Imagine one afternoon, your mind whispers, "This life feels pointless." Instead of panicking or trying to change your mood immediately, you pause, you take a breath, and you whisper back, "Ah, that feeling's here again." And just like that, you've stepped out of reaction and into awareness. From that space, you begin to see clearly. You are not your thoughts. And beneath all those dark clouds, there's a quiet sky and you still, observing. From that space, you can begin practicing compassion, not for others, but for your own mind. The mind doesn't need to be judged as good or bad. It just needs you to be present. Because in the end, what a negative thought needs most isn't a solution. It's your presence, a non-judging gaze, a quiet space to dissolve like morning mist in sunlight. 7. All thoughts are temporary, like passing clouds. One late autumn afternoon, in the courtyard of a small temple tucked away in Seattle, a middle-aged Manna businessman, a father of 3, sat quietly under a golden maple tree. The setting sun cast a soft glow on his tired face. After a long silence, he gently said, "There are moments when it feels like my own mind is suffocating me. Just one comment from someone, a past mistake, or a vague worry about the future, and I spiral into this storm I can't get out of. Then he asked something that made the entire meditation group fall completely still. How do you not get drowned by your own thoughts? It's a real question, and a deeply human one, because most of the time, our thoughts don't show up like gentle invitations. They arrive like storms, like waves crashing against the shores of our hearts. Some thoughts hurt. Some make us blame ourselves. Some just won't stop, leaving us exhausted. But in the Buddha's teachings, there's a beautifully simple truth. Every thought is temporary. It arises, and then it fades. It's born, and then it dies. Just like clouds drifting through the sky, no cloud ever stays forever. When the mind is calm, we can see this clearly. But when we're caught in the storm, we forget. That's why in moments like those, there's one gentle reminder that holds so much power. This thought is temporary. Just that. And suddenly the mind has something to hold on to. Like someone sinking who reaches out and grabs a branch enough to catch their breath. One meditator once shared the first time she tried this in real life. It was an ordinary morning. She woke up feeling heavy and empty, and instantly, her mind began replaying everything she did wrong the day before. Voices of self-blame pounded in her chest like waves. But this time, instead of getting swept away, she just sat quietly at the edge of her bed and whispered, "This thought is temporary." Then again, "This feeling is also temporary." No magic happened instantly. But after a few minutes, the storm softened. Not because she figured everything out, but because she stopped believing she had to fix it all right now. The Buddha once said, "Whatever arises will also pass." To truly see this is to see the path. This isn't just a philosophy. It's a key to inner freedom. Because once you really see through experience, not just logic that everything is temporary, the fear begins to fade. The deepest fear we carry isn't suffering itself. It's the belief that suffering will never end, that we'll always feel like this, that our life will never change. But life always changes. No thought stays. No emotion lives in our heart forever. They're all like clouds, sometimes thick, sometimes thin, dark or light, but eventually they all dissolve into the vast sky. And your mind, your awareness, is that sky, vaster than anything moving through it. There's a simple practice that many meditators use. When a negative thought comes, close your eyes, breathe softly, and imagine it as a cloud passing through the sky. No clinging, no fighting. Just breathe and whisper. Like a cloud, it will pass. And as this habit grows familiar, something amazing starts to happen. Your mind still thinks, but you're no longer its prisoner. Your emotions still arise, but they no longer rule you. You become the sky, not the clouds. And that is freedom. 8. Your inner voice needs to shift from criticism to compassion. Someone once shared after a Dharma talk, "I've never heard anyone speak to me as harshly as the voice in my own head." And sadly, that's not uncommon. We can be incredibly kind to others, good listeners, compassionate, willing to forgive our loved ones with an open heart. But when it comes to ourselves, we often turn cold and cruel. The voice inside might sound like, "Why are you so stupid? You always mess everything up. You'll never be good enough." And somehow, we believe those words like they're facts. That inner voice often starts early. Maybe it came from a childhood lacking warmth. Maybe from someone who made us feel like we only mattered if we were successful. Maybe from a society that constantly compares and demands perfection. Over time, we take on that role ourselves. Even when no one is criticizing us anymore, we keep playing judge and jury in our own minds. But through the lens of Buddhist teachings, there's a tender truth. No healing is truly possible if we keep speaking to ourselves in toxic ways. The Buddha taught, the mind is the root, the mind leads, the mind creates all things. If the mind arises with hatred, suffering follows like the wheel follows the ox pulling the cart. But if the mind arises with love, peace follows like a shadow that never leaves. So the first step isn't to be better. It's to shift how we speak to ourselves. Imagine a toddler learning to walk. They fall again and again. Would you yell at them, "Why can't you walk already?" Of course not. You'd smile, reach out your hand, and say, "It's okay, you're still learning." But when we make a mistake, we tear ourselves apart. Mindfulness isn't about becoming perfect. It's about recognizing that even in our imperfections, we still deserve kindness. And that kindness, that gentleness is the soil where transformation grows. A woman who lived with depression for over 12 years once shared during a retreat, "I tried everything, medications, therapy, self-help books. But what truly shifted me was the first time I sat down, looked inward, and said to myself, I know you're tired, and I'm here. Not be strong, not push through it, not try harder. Just a sentence, like a dear friend would say. A voice that doesn't demand you change to be loved, but loves you as you are. And the miracle is this. When you stop treating yourself like a broken thing that needs fixing, and start seeing yourself as a human being learning and growing, your mind begins to soften. You stop fighting with yourself. You begin walking with yourself. You stop fearing your own mind and start embracing its tender, hurting parts. In Buddhist practice, there's a meditation called metta, practice of loving kindness. When you offer metta to yourself, you might begin with simple whispers like, "May I be at peace. May I release these old criticisms. May I know I am worthy of love even when I'm not perfect." At first, these words might feel strange because the mind isn't used to hearing kindness from within. But like dry soil slowly absorbing rain, if you water it gently, consistently life begins to return. An old monk once told his student, "You don't need to silence your mind. You just need to make it feel safe." And that safety begins with the way you speak to it. So next time you feel disappointed in yourself, instead of saying, "Here we go again, I'll never get it right," try saying, "You're still learning. You're not perfect. And that's okay." Just one sentence like that can soften wounds that have been buried inside you for decades. 9. Transformation happens when you learn to observe thoughts, not become them. There was a man who once came to a private meditation session. He was in his early 40s, living in Chicago, with a stable job and what many would call a picture-perfect family. But he shared something quietly that many people can relate to. "Some days," he said, "it feels like my mind is living a completely different life filled with anxiety, assumptions, and endless imaginary scenarios." He continued, "Just one meeting that didn't go the way I expected, and my mind jumps straight into questions like, does my boss no longer trust me? Did I do something wrong? Am I being replaced?" He sighed. "I know those thoughts aren't grounded in reality, but I still get swept up in them." And honestly, that's so common. Thoughts don't need permission to show up. They arrive anytime, anywhere, and without mindfulness. We're pulled along without even realizing it. But in Buddhist meditation, there's a simple, elegant, and powerful practice, labeling thoughts, also known as noting. Not to judge, not to analyze, but just to see clearly. To create even a tiny space between you, the thinker, and the thought itself. That space, however, small as the beginning of inner freedom. Imagine you're walking down the street and a car zooms past. You don't jump into the car, you just see it go by. Thoughts are the same. You don't have to hop in and ride with them. You can simply notice, oh, a thought just passed. For example, when you're feeling anxious, instead of getting fully swallowed by it, you pause and silently say, anxiety is here. When your mind starts digging up the past, remembering, when you start judging someone, that's it. No storytelling, no fixing, no telling yourself, I shouldn't think this, or I have to stop it. Just label it, name it, and like calling out to an old friend who's wandered off, it stops. It realizes you've seen it, and you're no longer under its spell. The Buddha once taught, the one who clearly sees what the mind is doing is no longer trapped by the mind. Because when mindfulness is present, thoughts can no longer run wild in the dark. They've been brought into the light, and like a thief caught in the act, they begin to lose their power. One woman who practiced Vipassana shared a very honest story. She said she was always sensitive to criticism. Even gentle feedback could send her spiraling all day, crafting painful stories about being unloved or unwanted. But after learning the practice of noting, the first thing she'd do whenever her mind started spiraling was to say, storytelling. Just one phrase. But it kept her from going too deep into the old narrative. It gave her a little room to choose to continue or to stop. And that moment of choice, that is real freedom. Because freedom doesn't come from not having thoughts. It comes from not being ruled by them. The moment you can see a thought without being the thought, you step out of the role of victim of the mind and into the role of the mindful witness. Think of the mind like a river. Before, you'd fall in and get swept away. But now, with the practice of noting you're standing on the shore, the waves still rise. The current still flows. But you're not drowning in it anymore. A wise meditation master in Myanmar once said, you cannot stop the wind from blowing, but you can learn how to set your sail. And that little sail, that's labeling, not forcing the mind to be still, just knowing how to navigate. Amid all the inner movement. 10. The mind is a natural storyteller, but you don't have to believe every story it tells. Someone once described the human mind as a 24/7 radio station that never stops broadcasting. And the funny thing is, it never asks whether you want to listen. You're washing dishes. Suddenly it replays something from 2012. You're waiting at a red light. It creates a whole imagined conversation that's going to go badly this afternoon. You're about to sleep. It whispers. But what if that happens? And just like that, the inner movie starts rolling flashbacks, predictions, and dramatic side plots with no end in sight. Because the mind, it's a born storyteller. It can spin entire narratives from a glance, a delayed message, or even a moment of silence in conversation. And it doesn't stop there. It plays the role of director, actor, and audience. Then convinces you that the story is true. But the truth is, it's not. Not everything your mind says is real. Not every scenario it plays out is worth believing. Not every fear you feel is based in the present moment. A lot of the anxiety we carry, if we look closely, is just the result of unverified assumptions. They're inner broadcasts built on fuzzy memories or fleeting emotions. In my years working with students, whether high-powered executives in New York or single mothers in Texas, I've seen one common thread. When the mind starts storytelling, very few people recognize that it's just a story. They get swept in, react, worry, and behave as if the script were reality. But the Buddha taught, right understanding seeing beyond illusion is the beginning of freedom, meaning the moment you see the mind telling a story, you've already stepped out of its fog. A meditation student once shared something powerful. She often struggled with fear, especially the fear of not being loved. Whenever her boyfriend didn't text back right away, her mind spun wild. He doesn't care anymore. Maybe there's someone else. Maybe I'm not good enough. Before she even had the chance to ask what was really going on, she was already in pain. Not because of reality, but because of the story her mind wrote. Then one day during practice, she learned to pause and ask, "What story is my mind telling right now?" That single question changed her life. Not because the thoughts disappeared, but because she stopped believing them so quickly. In Buddhism, we call that insight, the ability to see clear beyond the story. You don't need to silence the mind to have peace. You just need to sit beside it like a wise listener, one who knows how to choose. It's like tuning into a radio station. You might hear something and go, "Oh, this program's not for me." You don't get mad at the radio. You don't smash it. You just don't attach to what it's playing. Same with the mind. It can broadcast anything it wants, but you have the power not to believe it. That's deep inner freedom, not from controlling thoughts, but from seeing them for what they are: impermanent, unfixed, and not who you truly are. A Western meditation teacher once said in a Dharma talk in Boston, "When you can smile at the news in your head, the way a father smiles when his child scribbles on the wall, then you know your practice has begun." The stories may still arise. The mind may still stir. But when you no longer chase after it, when you stop reacting on autopilot, you've shifted into the space of the observer, not the reactor. And in that space, there is rest. There is freedom. There is peace. 11. True healing begins when you look beneath the thoughts and touch the emotion underneath. One of the simplest yet most powerful questions on the spiritual path is this: what feeling is underneath this thought? It sounds gentle, even obvious. But if you actually pause not just to ask, but to really listen, you may discover something you've been avoiding your whole life. Because not every thought is a rational one. In fact, many thoughts are just surface-level disguises for deeper, unspoken emotions. A young woman once came to a silent retreat in the Oregon mountains. She said that for the first 3 days, she couldn't sit still. One sentence kept looping in her mind: "I don't belong here." Her thoughts kept circling around, leaving early. Everyone else felt too spiritual, too wise. She felt like an outsider. But on the 4th day, while walking mindfully in silence, a question gently surfaced: "What's the feeling underneath this thought that I don't belong?" And when she truly allowed herself to soften, the answer came quietly but deeply. It's the feeling of not being good enough. She wasn't afraid of the people around her. She was afraid of an old shame rising within. She didn't need to leave the retreat. She just needed to return to the feeling she had been avoiding through all those thoughts. See, we often get caught in our heads, but real suffering lives in the heart. And if we don't dare to go down and sit with the root feeling, all our efforts to stop thinking are just trimming the leaves, not touching the root. In Buddhism, the practice isn't about forcing the mind to be quiet. It's about understanding what it's really saying and why it's saying it. One teacher once said, "When the mind is screaming, don't silence it. Get closer and ask, 'What are you afraid of?' Because behind every storm of thoughts is often a wound that hasn't been healed yet." One mother shared that she would often get angry when her child made mistakes. Her mind would shout, "Why are you so careless?" But one day, she paused, and instead of reacting, she asked, "What's this anger really hiding?" What arose was not hatred, but fear. Fear that her child might not be strong enough for this harsh world. She wasn't angry at her child. She was just afraid. And when she touched that fear with compassion, the anger had nothing left to cling to. Mindfulness is not just about calming, it's about clarifying. It shines a light on what's hidden beneath all our mental defenses. It helps us see the real feeling behind the logical story. Sometimes, the mind keeps repeating, "No one understands me. I'm going to fail. Nothing can change anymore." But if you pause, breathe slowly, and ask, "What emotion is speaking here?" you might uncover loneliness, or helplessness, or a quiet sadness that never got a name. And in that moment, you're no longer fighting the mind. You're sitting beside it, like a friend. When a thought arises, you don't have to push it away. You can smile, breathe, and gently ask, "What emotion is this thought trying to speak for?" Instead of being trapped in the loop of thinking, you open a space for deep listening. It's no longer mind versus mind. It becomes the mind, witnessing itself with gentleness, not judgment. And that light of awareness, that's where healing begins. Because what's seen clearly begins to melt. What's named loses its grip. What's held with mindfulness slowly learns to rest. Everything we've shared, from recognizing thoughts, to meeting the emotions underneath, to practicing mindful presence in daily life, it's not about creating a perfect, flawless mind. It's about remembering, even in the mess, you can return. You don't need to erase every thought. You don't have to pretend you're not hurting. You just need to see clearly with as much tenderness as you can offer. Because in the light of the Dharma, healing doesn't come from fighting yourself. It comes from learning how to sit beside yourself with acceptance, with understanding, and with deep compassion. Maybe today you can't stop all the anxiety, but if you can be present with one mindful breath, with one true question, you've already taken the first step. One small step on the path of awakening. And if some part of you feels touched by this, if something inside feels a little lighter or clearer, please don't keep it just for yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who might need it. Subscribe to Buddhism Seeds and let yourself be nourished each day with teachings of mindfulness, compassion, and inner wisdom. You can also leave a comment below, share what touched you most, or just a few honest words from the heart. Because who knows? Maybe your words will be the light someone else needs on their journey back home to themselves. May peace be with you in every breath, and I'll see you again in the quiet wisdom of the returning mind.